Ideologies shape not only an individual's perspective but also influence the functioning of political institutions in any state. But have the movies penetrated into the political sphere by virtue of establishing their influence over individual ideology?
Hello and good morning. We'll be talking about how movies impact ideologies and how they construct worldview, as well as we'll be talking as to how movies influence the culture in countries, in your own country and in other countries as well. And to begin with, let me just give you an example, a very relevant example as to how movies actually construct ideologies. There was this book that came out by George Orwell titled Animal Farm. In that book, there was this depiction of communism and how communism can later on lead to some dictatorial tendencies. That book was converted into a movie, into an animated movie in 1954, and it was said that the CIA, the American Secret Agency, it had secretly funded this animation of this book. Why? Because during the Cold War there was this war of ideologies that was going on. The communism was being represented by the USSR, the capitalism being represented by the US, and both these countries were trying to win the propaganda war. And this animated movie on Animal Farm, on this book by George Orwell, it basically depicted the negative tendencies in communism. And USA was able to use this animated movie as a propaganda tool to influence the ideology of sound citizens, one, and the citizens of the prospective countries which they wanted to influence. That's one way to look at it. Secondly, any movie that you see always represents the popular culture that exists in that country. For instance, as an example, the movies that you see made in India in the 1970s and the 1980s, they depict a kind of an underworld, some crime being committed and some heroes coming out of that crime, drug-related crimes or other similar crimes, because that society at that time, the Indian society at that time, represented such things. There was a lot of chaos in the Indian society at that time. We had only been independent for 20 odd years, and our society had not refined itself, and therefore the movies reflected that part of our society. Now if you take this aspect, that how movies represent your popular culture, and if you try to look at it from a country to country perspective, an interstate relationship, you will see that this culture that every movie represents goes on to become a representative of that country in every other country where that movie is being watched. You take the example again of the Bollywood movies. Bollywood movies are popular not only in India but also abroad, especially in Africa and Central Asia. Now, when these movies they started getting exported into these countries, whether at the behest of the Indian government or through private means as well, when these movies got exported, the people in other countries started watching them, they started relating with them, because these movies that were being exported reflected a certain political culture that India represented at that time, a certain societal culture that India represented at that time. And these people, the outside people of other states, were able to connect with that, were able to relate with that. Family values, for instance, that are depicted in the Indian movies, or you see, a kind of romance relationship, a kind of Bollywoodized romance that you see. And just to give you another example here, I did this research in Africa where I was able to talk to various people as to how they view Bollywood movies. I talked to this woman who told me that I like the Bollywood movies because of the kind of romance that it depicts. And that woman was a divorcee. And I asked her, how did you get divorced? Just as a personal question I asked her. And that woman responded that my marriage lacked Bollywood kind of romance. Now that tells us how Bollywood, that's a movie industry that India represents, came to influence the familial lives or the worldview that shaped the perspective of these people, not just in India but abroad also, otherwise also. Let's take another example here. There's this often quoted statement that you find in the American movies that the United States does not negotiate with terrorists. You see any army related movie wherever terrorists are involved, you will see such references being made to the terrorists. So that this phrase especially became relevant after the 9/11 attacks that had taken place. Now this propaganda that the US has started this reflected to the entire world that we are presenting ourselves to the world as one such country whose government is never going to negotiate with terrorists. That gives a kind of a negative incentive for the terrorists to ever try to attack the US or try to influence the kind of politicking that goes on in the US. That gives a kind of a deterrence for such militants to attack, because now they will know that even if they want to attack the US, even if they hijack, for instance, a plane, USA is not going to negotiate with them. At least that was the propaganda that has been created. I believe in these manners, Bollywood, or for that matter, any kind of movies or film industry, do impact the ideology not just of your own country where the movies are made, but the ideology of the people all around the world. And they also tend to shape the worldview of everyone that's involved in them. Thank you so much.
Love is the most divine emotion, an emotion that can only be felt. But cinema has given a visual form to this abstract emotion. Movies have brought a generational transition in idea of love.
I would like to ask you how the movies has changed the perception of love among the youth, among the younger generation.
See, cinema can be looked at as the cultural barometer of our society. Most of the values, most of the ideas that define our worldviews, cinema perpetuates them. Whether it is love, or patriarchy, or class, or caste. Some of the images that we encounter and engage on the bigger screen, they stay with us forever. They are almost like validated by the audience and the director, of course. When it comes to love, what I've seen is in past few decades, when we were growing up, we had movies like Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, or we had movies like Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, or we had Karan Johar's universe of how to look at love within the framework of extended joint Indian family. But I feel that this idea of a boy meets a girl and stays happy forever, this was hugely interrupted because the society had changed and cinema had no other option but to reflect that change on the screen as well. And one of the first movies to do that was Kangana Ranaut's Queen. It's one of my favorite movies, and it was a movie which talked about what if the boy you love is not the one you're going to be happily ever after. That bond is never going to happen. What do you do then? And I think Ranaut's character, I'm forgetting her name right now, she sort of became a symbol for most of the women in the country that life without a man can be equally beautiful. That you need to love yourself before you venture out to love anybody else. Now this was a huge break, coming in a context where you have the iconic picture of Nargis and Raj Kapoor, Pyar Hua, Ikrar Hua, Phir Bhi Darta Hai Dil, right? To Queen, you have Kangana Ranaut says that मैंने होठों से लगाई तो हंगामा क्यों हो गया. So this is the journey of love, which I feel in Indian context has been quite significant. But of late, if you see, there are a number of movies that are coming which are talking about respecting your own self, loving your own self before you venture out to love anybody else. Having said that, I also feel that there is again a sort of a different idea now with the love is that people will come and go, and that is also one of the major reflections in cinema in India, and recent movie basically, where the essential element of love is first friendship and then moving on to the ideal of love, and thereafter also that there is no permanency in this idea of love. You may experience it with somebody today and there may be somebody else tomorrow. So yes, the idea of love has undergone a lot of change, and I think cinematic representation of love is reflected somewhere in our day-to-day lives as well. Love otherwise is also very difficult to define. Shakespeare has not even been able to tell us what exactly is love. You have Kafka talking on love, you have Camus talking on love. So So love is almost like a sand in your fist. You hold it too tightly, you are not going to have anything left in your hand. So it is otherwise also a complicated, complex idea, but cinematic representation of present day love is reflected in the younger generation as well. So today love can be, it's not anymore a transformative experience, it is transitory experience, and that is reflected in the younger generation as well. Not many people are willing to put in that kind of effort because love needs hard work. It's very easy to fall in love, but it takes a lot of hard work and effort to stay in love and stay committed to the relationship. Also, I don't know, I feel the consumerist culture that we are living in, where we are spoiled for choices. We want to buy a phone, so there are 36 different varieties of phones that we can pick up from. We consume things and discard so easily. I feel this is also playing a huge role on human relationships, especially at a younger age, when you think that the world is my playing field and my life is this huge canvas and I can paint whatever I want to paint on it. Yeah, so both the market forces and cinematic representation, we do see its impact on the younger generation's